Alright guys, so this is everything that the Saturn II comes with. We get a couple masks, we get a spatula, we get a plastic spatula. So this one's to scrape your models off the plate. This one's actually to go into the tub and check if anything's stuck there. We get some filters, some gloves, and some extra parts, snippers, a thumb drive, and this is how you're going to bring the files in, and there should be the slicer and some useful user information, things like that. So we got the power supply adapter, pretty good size. It is a 24 volt, 5 amp, 120 watts. And then we got the corresponding plug, depending on where you live, which we have the US type here. So here's something really cool, and this is a filter, specifically a carbon filter that goes into the machine right here. There's a little plug here that you got to take out, and this will plug in like that with USB, and this will help neutralize the vapors with the activated carbon cartridge that's inside while you're printing, which should keep as far as particles and smells to a minimum. We got a little helpful card here that shows us how to level the build platform, and you actually use this card, and we'll do that here in a second. And we got our quick start guide, which has the parameters here, all the parts of the printer, things like that. So yeah, quite useful to look over. So you guys can see here sitting on the desk, it is a pretty large printer. You can see my hand here. So yeah, this is a 10-inch screen, which is an 8K printer, and the detail that we can project off of these screens have really detailed prints. But let's go here to the top. On here we just have like a cap. It is plastic. We got a guide here for the lead screw. No bearing, just kind of goes into there. Huge linear rails, and there's 2 of them with large bearings, and that's great to see. This should be very stable, as this is our only moving part, which is up and down. This is a nice chunky aluminum. We can also see how this bolts to the rail, very sturdy and very strong. So yeah, this is great because as it goes up and down, it has to pull off the film, so there shouldn't be any kind of fluctuations as far as how robust everything is here. As we go down, we can see the tub. It's quite large. I like how thin it is. We do have a max line there in the back, and you don't want to overfill it because when your plate goes down, the resin will rise. We got a couple knobs here that release it, and they do come out completely. So for that reason, you probably want to pull them out, because if you flip this upside down, they'll fall out. There's 2 little handles on each side to grab it, which is great. And if we look at the bottom, we can see that it has little feet here as bolts, and those are actually also used to line it up here with the base. But what's great is that when you set this down, it's not going to sit on the film because it has like little feet. And this is the film here, which is replaceable. As you guys can see, those bolts. Now there is a protector here that we do need to take off. Going back here to the base, we got another protector. Let's go ahead and peel this off, which reveals the ultra large 10-inch screen, which is a monochrome 8K display. And also we do have UV lights underneath that glow with a Fresnel lens, which keeps the light moving up in one direction instead of scattering it. So let's keep looking at the printer. We have the base here, which is completely metal, and everything below that is plastic. The lead screw here comes out from the bottom. We also have the optical sensor here for the Z-axis, the USB port that we saw, which the filter plugs in, and it's quite important not to plug anything else in there because this uses a different voltage. It's actually 24 volts that comes out of here specifically for the filter. So make sure you don't use this for anything else. Going here to the front, we can see we got a pretty large screen, Elegoo logo. Pretty interesting design here. Not too crazy about it, to be honest. This blue here is actually not blue, it's chrome. It just has a protector on here, so let's go ahead and peel that off. That looks much better. There's actually another protector here, but you might want to keep this one on as long as you can to preserve the screen, as you will be touching this a lot, so it's kind of nice that it has some kind of protection. But you can do whatever you want. I prefer to keep mine on in the beginning, and as it wears off, I can peel it off. So yeah, here we have a big power button, and it's actually a physical button. Now what I don't see up front is a USB port for our thumb drive, and it's probably somewhere in the back, and I would have loved to see it somewhere here. Yeah, speaking of that, if we go to the right side, we got venting here, and there's our port there towards the back. So you can also see the feet. It kind of stands off the table a good amount, and there is some rubber down there so it doesn't slide around easy. To the left side of the printer, we don't have much here except for some venting, and this is all plastic. Going to the back, we can see how the channel here, as the Z-axis, looks very clean. And then in the back here, we got some stats, the name, the size of the machine, the power rating, 24 volts, 4 amps, and the weight, 11 kilograms. And in the back here is where we're going to plug in the power input from the adapter. And I got this thing flipped over on its side, and this is what's underneath. So not too much to see here. Again, there's rubber feet, actual rubber, so it does grip well. And yeah, let's stand this thing back up. So the last thing we haven't looked at is the build plate, and you guys can see it's quite large. There's another film under here. Gives you a little tip there to press firmly on the build plate when tightening the bolts. It's talking about these two large bolts, and we're going to go through the leveling process here in a minute. And you guys can see how heavy duty everything is. So this is all metal. It literally slides right into here. Then you got this really large knob here that tightens it up. And I love how large the knob is, as it's very easy to just tighten it up without, struggling, as you do need it decently tight so it's all sturdy. So yeah, that's the basics of the printer here. We have the cover next to it, and it's still wrapped. It's got a nice contour design that matches this, and there is a lip here that it seals, which is great. And what's interesting, that on the back of the cover there's a little opening here that looks like it's for a fan, or maybe additional filtration or exhausting maybe of the fumes from the printer. If you were going to run this continuously in a closed environment, they kind of give you a hole here for an option to suck the fumes out. So that's a really nice detail for someone that will care about that. Alright, so let's go ahead and plug our adapter in. We're going to insert the AC power cord into the brick, and then from the brick, this is the output to the printer. And if we flip around to the back, this is where we're going to plug it in. Alright, so let's hit our power button. Well, actually, before we do that, I'm going to take this off just in case. And it's this large button here. Alright, there it goes. It's powered on. We can see the logo. And the fan started up, so it does make noise as it's on. Not super loud, but there is a nice hum to it. So the first thing we want to do is level the build plate, and this is actually simpler than it looks, and it does go through all the steps here on this paper. And it's pretty simple, but I'll explain it here. Also, there are some nuances that you should know about the actual leveling process and the offset mostly. Yeah, I got the Z-axis here raised pretty high, and if we go to tools and manual, we can raise that and lower it. So actually I need to probably lower it a little bit here. So what you're going to do is you're going to put your build plate on there, and you need to peel the protector. Don't forget to do that. And it just inserts into this hole, into the arm. So yeah, and then you can just going to tighten it on the top with this big nut. So then we're going to grab our large wrench, and we're going to release these two bolts. And mine were actually loose. And you guys saw when I undid that, the spring fell down. And the way this bed works, it's spring operated, and so it's going to push onto the bottom and compress a bit, which is fine, but it also rotates back and forth, so you're going to have to orientate that also. So now we can click on home, and what that's going to do is going to go down into the paper here. And home is preset by the factory, where it will not damage anything as long as you got these loose. So make sure you do that before you do anything else, is loosen those bolts. So you guys see how it compresses. There we go. And mine actually makes noise there. Normally it does not. I turned that on, and we'll go through those settings in a second. So what you want to do is make sure your card is completely underneath the build plate, and you want to try to orientate this pretty close. And you're going to tighten it right here. And when you do tighten it, you want to put a little bit of pressure around it. That way it stays pretty flat all around. So I'm going to tighten the side one there, and then the front one, and then kind of snug them up a little more. So don't put too much pressure down, as we have the screen there. And definitely don't forget to unscrew these before you do anything else, as you can damage the screen if you put too much pressure onto it. Okay, so now that's tight, what I like to do is go here and change this to 0.1 millimeters and go up once or twice, probably twice, let's see, maybe 3 times. And our card should cut loose there. So we went 0.3, and what we can do is go to every corner of the build plate and see if it feels even. And this is how you'll know that your build plate is pretty level on all sides, is that the card feels the same friction everywhere. So yeah, mine is perfect here. And that's pretty much how you set the level of the build plate. Now, one thing that you might want to do when you start printing is, if you have elephant foot or you're too close to the film, you want to raise this up. What you could do is just manually add more paper, and that would be kind of manually do it, or you could do it in the screen, and that is going to be, if we go back here, the set to 0. Now the way that works is that you set it whatever offset you want. So right now we're actually 0.3 up compared from home. So let me just pull this card out, and we'll click home again, and you'll see that it'll drop back down to where home was. So this is where it's going to start printing always, unless you set the Z offset. So let's say I want it 0.2 higher than the regular home. What I'm going to do is I'm going to push that twice, which I did. So it did raise 0.2, and then I'm going to hit the set to 0 button, and that's going to save that position, which is 0.2 higher than the home. So we'll confirm that. And now every time the printer starts printing, it'll raise itself 0.2 before it starts. So the confusing part is that if I go back to manual here and I home it, it'll actually go back to home, not the 0.2 that I set it at. So keep that in mind. It only raises the 0.2 that you raised when it starts printing, not when you home it. So when you home it, it'll always go back to its original home, no matter what set to 0 set off. I'm going to set this back to the home position. So I'm just going to click set to 0 where it's at. And now it's going to remember this position as the starting point when you start printing. So hopefully that made sense. It wasn't too confusing, but yeah, there's a little nuance there that could be a little confusing, especially for people that don't know how that works. All right, so let's raise this thing up quite a bit higher. And we'll put our tub in, which I already peeled the protector underneath. Go up a little more here. So this should just drop in, as it got little dimples in the base that the bolts go into. It's really easy to line it up, and we'll put the bolts in on each side to secure it. And let's go up a little bit more here. And for the next part, I did install the charcoal carbon filter here on the side where it plugs in, and it's already all put together. And what we did, let's pull it apart. There's a cartridge in there that's carbon, and that was separately bagged, which we just unbagged and slid in there. And there's a little filter that goes there. And then we just put it together, and this will help filter out the vapors so it doesn't smell so bad and just clean the air. And you guys can see the USB port there will plug in into the base there, and we do have a light that lights up indicating that it is working, and you can feel it as there's a little fan under there that spins and circulates the air. Alright, so for the next part, let's go through this menu here. But before that, I'm going to go ahead and plug in the USB thumb drive that was included back here on the side on the right, and it does glow. And hopefully you guys can see that. But yeah, this is our main menu. So in the tools, we had the manual, which we went over, and that's where we go up and down and home. Exposure, this is going to test our screen and UV lights. So if we click on next, there's going to be an image that's put out there, and you guys can see it there. So our LCD screen is working, as we can see the image, and the UV lights are shining through. So everything is working, which is great to see. And that's how you can test, make sure everything is operational. If we go back, here we have set to 0. This is where we talked about the leveling. Once you get it to where you want it, the offset, you click that, and it will start printing from that offset. We got the stop button, which will stop everything. The clean tank, if we click that, what that's going to do is open up the whole screen completely to the UV light. And the reason it's called clean tank is you can cure the rest of the resin that's in here and then kind of peel it off. I don't normally recommend doing that, as if it's too thin, it could fuse to the film and then be really hard to take off, and you can kind of scratch up and ruin the film. But if you do need to use this feature, they do have it here. And yeah, that's everything for the tools. So here we have system, and it's going to be information about the printer. And this is where you turn on that sound that you guys heard when it peeps. So I'm going to leave mine on. We got languages. So it's Chinese or English, and it goes through the two. We got service, how to contact the company through Facebook, website, and email. And that is it, guys. So it's quite simple on the navigation here for the Saturn II. So here we have the print button, and that's going to read our USB thumb drive that we plugged in. So actually that's not how it starts, as I already got this far. This is how it starts. So you got like files, and you can click on the file to open it, and it kind of goes into the sub file. To go back, it's a little confusing. You have to click on the file that you clicked on. So if you just click this, it'll go back to the main menu. So you have to click on the file to go back to the front of the filing thing. So it's a little confusing, but once you click around, you'll get used to it. So on the first one here, it does say models, printables, whatever. And we do have some rooks that they included that we can start with. So yeah, that's the typical thing for Elegoo there. But you know, they're quick and pretty detailed prints that we can do our first print as our test. So at this point, we're pretty much ready to print. Now, there's a few precautions here that you want to keep in mind, as you want to be in a pretty ventilated area. I'm in my garage right now, so I got some airflow going. And also protect your hands with gloves that they include, and wear a mask so you don't have to expose yourself to breathing fumes. Now, different resins will, you know, be more harmful than others. So keep that in mind. And if you do use alcohol also for cleaning up the resins, that could be very smelly and quite harmful to your health. Now with that said, we're going to be using Elegoo resin today, which is their special 8K, and it is a water washables. And these are my favorite because these are the least smelly and easiest to deal with after you're done printing, as it only takes water to clean it up. Now there's some, you know, pluses and minuses to it, depending, you know, on what you're looking for and things like that. But yeah, again, just keep safety in mind, as all this stuff is chemicals and you want to be careful with them. So it comes in its own bag. Also, it looks like a little brush, which is really nice, as this could be helpful to clean up the models. And so I'm not putting any gloves on because I'm not going to get in contact with the resin. I'm just going to pour it in there. So yeah, let's go ahead and open it up. And there is a seal we need to cut. Now you do want to make sure this is mixed up pretty well, and not too violently, just kind of flop it around a bit. Yeah, if you shake it too violently, you'll put a lot of air in it, and that could, you know, be a little bit too foamy or whatever. But yeah, just kind of mix it up. Mine was kind of moving around quite a bit, so it should be fine. Yeah, all we're going to do is just pour it into our tub here, and we can pour it straight on the plate. It'll just roll off, or we can just do this either way. And you guys can see this is a gray color here, more like a darker gray. And you don't want to go over the max line that we saw earlier, so I'm going to stop probably about right here, and we can add some to it if we need more. Looks like we're pretty much ready, guys. So let's go ahead and click the play button here for the rooks, and that should start it up, and there it goes. All right. And our first layer has started, and it looks like there's exactly 1,000 layers that it's going to go through. So let's go ahead and unwrap our cover, and we're going to set it over the printer, and it falls on in its own little groove here, and that's going to seal up the whole thing and really keep the fumes to a minimum. And you guys can see it's quite large here on the top, as it is a pretty large print volume, which, by the way, I don't know if I mentioned yet, it's 219 wide, 123 deep, and 250 millimeters tall. So yeah, very nice large build volume. So we are on our third layer, and the first however many layers are longer exposure, and then it goes faster. All right, not sure how much you guys can see, but hopefully something here. So we can see the layer that we're on right now. On the top, it projects a picture. We got the percentage bar at 1%. We got the file name. It is a CTB file. We got how much longer it's gonna take, which is 3 hours and 13 minutes. Time passed, which is 4 minutes. And the layer that we're on, which is 6 out of 1,000. So here we have hot button, stop, pause, and more settings. So if we click that, we can see we can adjust our bottom layer, which there's 5 of them at 30-second exposures, and then everything after that is 2.5 seconds. And we also can adjust our exposure offsets, and you can actually change that by clicking on it and adjusting that. So yeah, everything looks pretty good, and it's quite simple, guys, not too complicated here with resin printing. Most of your things are done in the slicer when you slice the print. So one thing that I do want to check is the pause button, and that's to see if the build plate will raise up, so we can see if our print's stuck or not underneath. All right, so we're printing away, and we're at layer 53, looks like. So yeah, pretty quick here. It's only been, what, 15 minutes since we started. So let's go ahead and take the cover off. And wow, not too much smells. I think this carbon filter here is doing extremely well. That's actually surprising how low odor it is. I mean, there is still odor, but it's not bad at all. All right, so if we click this pause, what I'm expecting it for it to go up so we can see what's underneath the plate. So let's go ahead and click it. And it is going up, which is a good sign. And going up actually a really good amount. And I don't know if you guys can see or not, but we do have 2 rooks stuck there underneath. You can see the round pieces there. So yeah, very cool. So it looks like the pause button works perfect. So if we push play, it should continue printing where it's paused from. So yeah, I'm very glad that they have this, as you know, if you're just starting out or beginning to print, you know, this could be quite helpful to see if your print has been stuck to the plate and everything's good. Because you don't want to, you know, print a pretty large print and then find out that, you know, an hour or 2 later that didn't even stick. So yeah, very cool way to check if everything's good. So I'm going to continue to print this out, and we'll see how the rooks come out. Alright, so our rooks are done, and you guys can see them kind of there hanging. And on the screen here it says it took 3 hours and 26 minutes. And we'll confirm that and goes to the main menu. Now for the next part, what we need to do is remove the bottles and clean them. So there's a couple ways you can do this. The best way would be to have a wash and cure station, which is great because you can just have a more seamless processing. Now if you don't have a station or don't want to invest in one, you'll need some kind of water to wash. Since this is water washable, we just have normal water and a pan to work in. Scrape the models off, kind of, you know, keep your area clean. We got a spatula here. I'm using a different one. Our little brush, and you might need this to check, make sure nothing's down there, but most likely as long as the print has printed, we're good. So let's go ahead and put this glove on. And so coming in contact with the resin is not a good idea, so make sure you wear protective gear and also wear your mask. All right, so we're going to loosen the bolt here, and this should just slide right out, and you guys can see our rooks are beautifully stuck on there and look great. And I'm going to go straight down into this pan, and it looks like we got a pretty good distance between the bed and the model. Let's see how easy it pops off. So I'm just going to grab the spatula and try to get in there and kind of hit it. Maybe we'll go a little sideways just in case so it doesn't fly away. I'm going to try to put the edge into it. Alright, so that one flew away. Not a huge deal. So they are stuck on really good, so maybe going up a little bit on the offset would help release a little better. And there we go. That one came off a little bit more elegantly, falling right into the pan. So yeah, and you guys can see everything looks nice and clean here. So we can just put this back onto the printer, tighten it up, and we're ready for our next print. And we have our rooks off, so let's go ahead and drop them into the water and get them start to shed that extra resin around for the cleanup. Now you want to be somewhat careful with these because they're pretty soft when they come straight out of the printer, meaning that if you push too hard or scratch too hard on it, it'll show up in the print. So normally what I like to do is kind of just shake them around like this, and that works pretty good. If you want to, you can use this brush. It is pretty soft, but it can still leave marks, so be very careful. If there's like fine details that you want to wipe over just to make sure that they'll show up really good. But to be honest, these things look really good without even needing too much wash. As you guys can see, they're quite detailed and sharp looking, even with those letters there on top. So yeah, however, you got to wash them in water. The better you wash them, the better they'll look. Or rinse them and then dry them. And you want this to dry naturally, slowly, just air dry. Don't put them in the sun right away when they're wet, because they will get burnt and you'll have like all these white stains all over it, burnt marks. And you don't want to really cure them in the sun anyways. Just kind of cure them in a shady place near a window or something, but not direct sunlight. And after a little while, they'll cure, be really nice to the touch, and start to harden up to the point where you can handle them much more rougher. Now again, if you get a wash and cure machine, that will make your life much easier, especially for the cleanup, as the water twirls in there and it really cleans them well. And also the UV lights will cure them much quicker, and you can use them quicker. Now you do still have to air dry them before you cure them, or they'll have the same burn marks. Alright, so let's talk about the cleaning process. And what's great is it's not that complicated or very hard to clean up water washables. Again, it's because you just use regular water. So I'm finished printing and I popped my last print off, went ahead and washed the plate with water. Very easy. You just rinse it, and that's exactly what you're going to do with the tub. But we do still have some resin in there that we need to save or recycle or put back into the bottle. And you don't want to just throw it away, and sometimes you'll have more or less left over, so you want to save it for next time. Now the only thing is you want to pour it back through a strain filter. So let's go ahead and loose the tub, and we want to pull the pins out completely. Grab the tub. Hopefully you guys can see on one of the edges there is a pour spout right here, and this is where we're going to pour it out. So you might want to use a funnel, because if you just do this, it's going to pour all over the place. But I'm going to go ahead and attempt it here, and we're just going to pour it through the filter, and then out the filter is going to go into the bottle. So we're going to try to get as much out as we can, and you guys can see that we do have some chunks inside the tub from the last print. And I kind of suspected that because I did have some pieces come apart on the print because it was so thin and fragile. But yeah, so we just have a very small film in there. You guys can see maybe. And you can use the clean tank and make this solid, but if you're going to do that, I would recommend leaving more in there than that. That way you can peel it all off. I'm not going to risk it because it's easier just to clean this up than to try to use UV rays to solidify it. So yeah, now we recycled our resin and we still have some more for next time. So I'm gonna go quickly rinse this off. All right, so you guys can see the tub is clean. It's gonna be a little hazy as you use it. It's gonna become more hazy, and this is when you will have to eventually replace the film, which is part of the maintenance on a resin printer. Yeah, as simple as that. We're all cleaned up and ready for our next print. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that you don't have to pour this out and clean it all up. And I'm talking about the resin, as the plate itself is really easy to clean, obviously. But if you do want to have resin sitting in here because you're going to print in a day or two or a week, it's okay, as long as you keep it in a place where it won't harden. The cover on top protecting from UV rays. The only thing is, after a few days, you might have to come in there and mix it all up, as it will start separating the resin itself with the different polymers inside. So let's take a closer look at the rooks, and we'll try to zoom in as much as we can, as there is lots of details. So we can see the lettering. It's ultra sharp, and it says printed in 3 dimensions. So what's cool about these rooks, there's a helix going down with some stairs also going around. It might be a little hard to see. You can see the stairs there and the helix inside right there. So yeah, everything is super sharp and super clean. And even on this lettering here where it says Saturn 2, it's just very nice and sharp and smooth, and you guys can see how nice and smooth the walls are. So we did have a little bit of layer peeling here on top, not too severe, but other than that, it's pretty much perfect, I would say. So yeah, even the bottom looks great, and this is probably the best rook or rooks that I've ever seen.